Hi, welcome back to Elements of Poetry. My name is Kara Roseborough and I'm excited to get started with you today. Before we jump into our new element of the week, I'd like to revisit lyrical poetry that we talked about last week and share with you a poem from one of our viewers, Lorelei Goldman. This is her poem, 15.
A handful of shells is thrown at me by a girl that I took to the sea. I smile when I see you surrender to the pull and push of adolescent splendor. You are a child of love, light, and radiance, and I cherish your brightness and your ongoing design of selfhood. You will always light up my life, even as you grow away, which you must do. Remember to brush against my mommy's side now and then, as you brush by with a chuckle and that wonderful connecting look in your eye. Oh, I'd love to walk with you arm in arm like when you were 8 or 9, yet the natural flow and pace of your expanding is yours and not mine. Move into adulthood with grace and joy and allow me to know you as you enter new and encouraged good places. Know that you will experience that life is not always full of comfort and pleasure, and that we need to feel agony and adventure.
This poem is a beautiful meditation on motherhood, and specifically the relationship between a mother and her daughter as that daughter grows up and is given space to become her own woman. As we talked about last week, this poem fixates on a specific moment, a relatively small moment, of a mother and daughter on a shore as they're collecting seashells, and the daughter throws the seashells. And it takes that moment and expands upon it, creating this really beautiful picture of this moment here. It focuses on a kind of love. As we talked about last week, most lyrical poems will talk about really big emotions, romantic love often being one of them. Here, of course, we have parental love. Thank you so much, Ms. Lorelei, for sharing this poem with us. And now, let's jump into our new element of the week, repetition. Repetition is the recurrence of words, phrases, sounds, images, and ideas that occurred throughout poetry and prose. So it's a literary device that occurs in both, and it really is one of the most common literary devices that you'll find in poetry. There are many different kinds of repetition, and we're going to break down some of them today. Anaphora is the repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of several successive clauses that have different endings. Epitrophe is the repetition of the last word or phrase used in successive phrases, sentences, or clauses. Symplos is when you repeat the same word at the beginning and at the end of each line or phrase or clause. Antanaclasis is the repetition of a word, but giving it a different meaning the second time. Negative positive restatement is when you have the same statement, phrase, clause, but they have similar meanings within their repetition. Palologia is the repetition of a single word or phrase in immediate succession. In addition to the repetitions of words and phrases like we just talked about, we can also have the repetition of sounds. You have consonants, which is the repetition of the consonant, assonance, which is the repetition of the vowel within a word, and alliteration, which is the repetition of the initial sound of a word. In poetry, we often see refrains used as a form of repetition. A refrain is a line that will recur at regular intervals throughout the poem. So you may have 4 new lines and then the 5th line is the repeated line, or 3 new lines and the 4th line is repeated. It can also be used to divide up different sections. Let's say you have a lengthier poem. You may have 1 line that divides each new section of a poem, and that line is repeated throughout. All of these kinds of repetition are used to emphasize an idea, an image, something that the poet wants to drive home to the audience or the reader. Today, we're going to look at the work of Nikki Giovanni, whom we'll talk about more on Thursday. For right now, we're going to look at a few of her poems that use different kinds of repetition. Let's look at this excerpt from Nikki Giovanni's Resignation. I love you because the earth turns round the sun, because the north winds blow north sometimes, because the Pope is Catholic and most rabbis Jewish, because the winters flow into springs and the air clears after a storm, because only my love for you, despite the charms of gravity, keeps me from falling off this earth into another dimension. I love you because it is the natural order of things. I love you like the habit I picked up in college of sleeping through lectures or saying I'm sorry when I get stopped for speeding, because I drink a glass of water in the morning and chain smoke cigarettes all through the day, because I take my coffee black and my milk with chocolate, because you keep my feet warm, though my life is a mess. So in her poem Resignation, Giovanni is repeating the phrase, I love you. She's also repeating because da 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 da. So we're seeing an example of anaphora here with the repetition of that beginning of each line with each successive line, more or less. We also see a repetition in the structure of the poem itself. You have the initial line go down to the second line, an indentation, and then several lines after that that appear within that indentation before we return to I love you, which goes to the farthest left, and then repeating that pattern once again. Let's look at another one. A journey. It's a journey that I propose. I am not the guide, nor technical assistant. I will be your fellow passenger. Though the rail has been ridden, winter clouds cover, autumn's exuberant quilt, we must provide our own guideposts. I have heard from previous visitors, the road washes out sometimes, and passengers are compelled to continue groping or turn back. I am not afraid. I am not afraid of rough spots or lonely times. I don't fear the success of this endeavor. I am Ra, in a space, not to be discovered, but invented. I promise you nothing. I accept your promise. Of the same, we are simply riding a wave that may carry or crash. It's a journey, and I want to go. I want to focus on the structural repetition that we see here. Not necessarily repeating a word or a phrase, Giovanni's actually repeating the use of an ellipses, creating space, causing the reader and the speaker to pause before moving on to the next phrase, the next idea. We also see that there are 2 or 3 lines and then a space, 2 or 3 lines and then a space, so we have that repetition within the structure as well. The use of the ellipses creates the feeling of actually riding on a wave, of going on this journey, and even builds in some anticipation. We'll get to talk more about Nikki Giovanni's life and work this coming Thursday on our next episode of Black Poets Then and Now. Until then, I'd like to turn the tables over to you, our viewers, and give you the opportunity to share your work with us. Your challenge for this week is to write a poem in any style using the literary device of repetition. Your poem can be 10 lines or less and is due by this Sunday. You can submit your work to fjtheater@cityofevanston.org. Please remember that by submitting your work, you grant Fleetwood-Jourdain Theater the right to review and share your submission via video and on our social media platforms for the Stay Creative series. Don't be shy. We would love to read and share your work. Be a part of our Stay Creative community and share your love of literature with our fellow viewers. Again, that's fjtheater@cityofevanston.org. Send your work to us by this Sunday. I look forward to reading your submissions. Until then, stay safe and stay creative. Bye!